Crystals have always fascinated me, not for any mystical reasons, but simply because they look amazing. There's a huge crystal jewelry and fossil show a few hours away from me every year, and I look forward to it like a second Christmas. It's the one time I let myself go all out since I don't spend much on other things. My boyfriend always comes with me. It's not exactly safe to walk around carrying thousands of dollars worth of crystals alone. Plus, he's quite intimidating, standing at 6 feet 9 inches with bright red hair, a thick Russian accent, and so muscular it's visible through his clothes. He doesn't share my passion for crystals, but he enjoys seeing me happy. This year, the show had an exceptional tanzanite crystal. It was high quality and cost me nearly $2,000, but I just couldn't resist. After making my purchase, we met at the cafe area to review our finds. I needed to use the restroom, so I left my boyfriend with my purchases, trusting him more with them than I trust myself. What I didn't realize was that he had no idea about the value of the tanzanite. When I returned from the bathroom, I saw him holding the tanzanite up to the light, examining it right in front of at least 50-60 people. Many were probably shocked that someone was casually handling such an expensive piece. As soon as he noticed me approaching, he quickly placed it on the small table between us. My stomach dropped as I watched the crystal wobble precariously, nearly falling off the edge. He managed to catch it before it fell. He asked me what the pretty crystal was. Before I could lecture him about its worth, we heard a child crying nearby. The boy was just tall enough to see over our table, and his eyes were fixed on my tanzanite. My boyfriend, who adores children, looked at me with pleading eyes. He suggested that the child could touch the crystal, but not hold it. I took a deep breath and nodded reluctantly. My boyfriend cheered up the child and then gently asked where his mother was. The question seemed to panic the child, who started crying again, unable to locate his mother. My boyfriend handed me the tanzanite and began consoling the boy, assuring him that we'd help find his mom. As the child calmed down, we started packing our things to head to the main entrance where they could make an announcement for a lost child. Just as I was carefully placing the tanzanite on top of my other purchases, I heard aggressive footsteps approaching. A woman demanded to know why her child was with us. I could hear her chomping on gum as she spoke. My boyfriend asked if the child was hers. She confirmed in a condescending tone, deliberately stretching out each word as if my boyfriend couldn't understand basic English. The boy excitedly called out to his mother and ran from my boyfriend to her side. I bluntly asked the woman where she had been, as I'm not as patient as my boyfriend, especially when it comes to children being left unattended. She casually mentioned she was just checking out some crystals and told me not to be so rude, even wagging her finger in my face. This caused me to back up slightly, and she smirked at my reaction. Her child excitedly told his mother about the pretty rock he had seen and begged to have it. The woman immediately demanded that we bring out the crystal. When I expressed confusion, she made a racist comment, saying she thought Asians were supposed to be smart. She laughed, looking directly at me. I was completely stunned. This was the first time someone had been so openly racist toward me. The woman pointed to the tanzanite in its clear case atop my bag after her son indicated that was the one he wanted. She commented that it looked expensive but offered only $50 for it. I refused, explaining I wasn't interested in giving it away. She questioned why not, making another racist remark about whether children's happiness mattered in my culture or if we just put kids to work at her child's age. I was utterly amazed at her audacity. I tried to explain politely that it wasn't for sale, especially not at that price. She raised her offer to $75, accusing me of trying to scam her if I asked for more. I told her the crystal cost over $2,000, so I definitely wouldn't sell it for less. She scolded me for supposedly swearing in front of her child, though I hadn't. At this point, I knew this interaction was definitely getting posted on Reddit. The woman demanded proof of the price, saying she would gladly pay if I could show her. I grabbed the clear case and opened it, pulling out the receipt to show her. Stupidly, I held the actual crystal low enough for her child to snatch it and sprint away. His mother immediately turned to make a run for it, Thankfully, my boyfriend reacted quickly. He caught the woman mid-escape, leaving her dangling in the air by the back of her shirt. She threatened to call the police and sue us, yelling that we would regret not selling the crystal to her. She continued struggling as my boyfriend held her off the ground. The child, noticing his mother wasn't beside him, turned around and slowly approached us. Seeing this, the woman dropped her aggressive attitude. She began making ridiculous excuses, saying he was just a kid who wanted a toy and that we should be apologizing to them for denying them happiness. She even had the nerve to suggest we would be terrible parents if we couldn't help out someone else's child. She spouted the most ridiculous justifications I'd ever heard, not even attempting to take responsibility for her actions. When her child reached us, I quickly snatched the tanzanite from his hands and passed it to my boyfriend, who tucked it safely into his inside jacket pocket. The child immediately burst into tears. The woman screamed again, this time attracting security. We explained the situation and my boyfriend carefully set her down on her feet. In response, she kicked him hard in the leg, which he barely reacted to. Security called the police and asked if we wanted to file a complaint, while the woman and her child interrupted us, shouting about how terrible we were for denying a child happiness and telling us to go back to our country. We proceeded with pressing charges. The police arrived quickly and took statements from everyone, including several witnesses who had seen the entire incident. The woman was charged with attempted theft, assault for kicking my boyfriend, and a hate crime due to her racist comments. As an added bonus, Child Protective Services was notified about her leaving her child unattended in a crowded venue and encouraging him to steal. She left in handcuffs, screaming about how unfair everything was, while her poor child was picked up by his father, who apologized profusely for his ex-wife's behavior. My Tanzanite now sits in a special display case in my home with a much better security system. Since I'm stuck in quarantine after testing positive for corona, I thought I'd share a story from a few years ago to pass the time. I'm originally from the Netherlands, but I moved to Japan 18 years ago. Japan is a really nice place if you know where to find work. Although I don't look Japanese, I'm well-mannered, follow Japanese traditions and etiquette, and even took my Japanese wife's surname. My Dutch surname is unpronounceable in Japanese, and I didn't want to cause trouble for my wife, kids, or the Japanese people I interact with. I'm basically as Japanese as a foreigner can be, though I still maintain some Dutch traditions like baking oil balls during New Year and treating my staff to peppernoten on certain holidays. One day, after concluding a business meeting in Tokyo, I decided to eat some ramen at a local shop. I prefer these low-key food stands to fancy restaurants. It was a small ramen shop with a sign reading, "No foreigners allowed." You see these signs more often than you'd think at smaller shops, but usually the owners put them up because they can't speak English. Most of the time, if you speak Japanese, they'll serve you anyway. I went in since the place was almost empty with only one other customer, and I somewhat knew the owner. I greeted the owner and ordered my bowl of ramen when the entitled salesman, ES, suddenly spoke up. He rudely asked what a foreigner like me was doing in the shop, using the offensive term gaijin to refer to me. I explained that I was just ordering ramen and mentioned that their food was the best in town. The entitled salesman switched to broken English, telling me he wasn't talking to filth like me. He turned to the shop owner and pointed out that there was a sign stating no foreigners were allowed. At this point, I started secretly filming because I wasn't sure if things would get out of hand and whether the shop owner would take my side. Japanese police tend to believe natives before foreigners. I tried to point out that I could understand what he was saying since I speak Japanese. The entitled salesman immediately told me to shut up and began bragging about his importance. He claimed to work at a major Japanese department store as a salesman responsible for getting goods to 18 million people and insisted this was something I could never do. I simply responded with an okay, not wanting to escalate the situation. The shop owner tried to calm things down. He explained that he had no problem with people who speak Japanese and only put up the sign because he couldn't handle foreigners who couldn't speak Japanese during rush hours, as it cost him business. The entitled salesman continued his xenophobic rant, stating that a foreigner is always a foreigner. He added that even if a Neanderthal could speak their beautiful language, they would still just be a foreigner. I told him that I was actually a Japanese citizen, having given up my Dutch citizenship years ago. I said I was Japanese now, regardless of whether he liked it or not. He refused to accept this, insisting that I could never be Japanese and making comments about keeping their race clean. At this point, I decided to stop being polite and just troll him. I mentioned having a Japanese wife and exaggerated that I had 7 kids, though I only have 2 in reality. I claimed my oldest daughter was president of the Archer Club and my 3rd son wanted to become a monk. The entitled salesman became even more agitated. He blamed foreigners like me for stealing old Japanese wives and claimed it was our fault that he didn't have a wife and family. I laughed hysterically at this and suggested that perhaps being a jerk was the real reason he was alone. When he took offense at being called rude, I elaborated that I won my wife's heart by being polite, supportive, and letting her live the life she wanted. I accused men like him of only wanting women to stay home, take care of children, and remain silent. He grew angrier, claiming that foreigners like me disgraced their traditions. When I asked if he was serious, he defended his position by saying that women's role was to have children and stay home. He blamed Americans for teaching Japanese women otherwise and causing Japan's low birth rate. I pointed out humorously that the Netherlands isn't part of the United States but offered to speak like an American redneck if he preferred. He dismissed this distinction, lumping together America, the Netherlands, Germany, and Sweden, and accused whites of destroying everything beautiful in the world. Taking the opportunity to mock him further, I put on an exaggerated American accent and started speaking nonsense about guns, using random measurements and American references. I talked about shooting pythons, mentioned deagles and M&P-15s, and fighting enemies of the free world. When he told me to shut up, I continued with the accent, rambling about watching the Super Bowl, having Diet Coke and McDonald's, and making up absurd claims about NASCAR and presidential medals. This pushed him over the edge. He started screaming that foreigners like me should be gassed to death and put in gas chambers. He ranted that our bones should be used to strengthen their roads and that they would exterminate all filth from their country. I was honestly shocked by the extreme nature of his outburst. I had hoped he would simply walk away defeated, but instead, he seemed ready for a physical confrontation. I didn't want to fight. The shop owner at this point was calling the police and removing his "No Foreigners Allowed" sign, recognizing it was technically illegal. Somehow we avoided coming to blows, though the entitled salesman continued shouting racist things as the police arrived. When the police came, the entitled salesman immediately claimed that I had assaulted him and demanded my arrest. Fortunately, the shop owner vouched for me, and the police began to take the entitled salesman away. Then came the most ironic part. When the police asked for his name, I discovered that we shared the same surname, my wife's historical samurai family name that I had adopted. When I mentioned this coincidence aloud, the entitled salesman completely lost control. He began spewing even more racist comments and death wishes, apparently forgetting that police officers were standing right beside him. As a result, he was taken to the police station and fined. I later heard that he lost his job over the incident. The shop owner was grateful for my patience and apologetic about the situation. As a gesture of goodwill, I translated his menu into English and suggested a system to help foreigners order more smoothly. This ended up benefiting his business, as he now makes extra money from foreign customers. All's well that ends well, right? I guess some people are so obsessed with squeezing every penny that they end up losing the whole dollar. I started working at this hot foil printing company about 3 years ago. The owner was an older guy close to retirement age who understood the business and mostly left us alone to do our jobs. Like everyone else on the production floor, I operated 2 printing machines, making sure they ran smoothly and produced quality work. Our official hours were 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with an hour lunch break. But that's not how manufacturing really works. Most of us came in about 15 to 30 minutes early to set up the machines and stayed late to clean up after finishing a run. Nobody complained because the work needed to get done, and the boss appreciated our dedication. The company was profitable, customers were happy, and orders were always completed on time. Then everything changed. The owner announced he was planning to retire, selling half the company to a larger firm with plans to sell the remaining half a year later. That's when the new management team swooped in. The first thing they did was install a time clock. Not a good one, mind you, but literally the cheapest model they could find. It never worked right. The cards would shift around, causing times to print on top of each other or in the wrong columns. Complete mess. At first, we all just did what we'd always done. Came in early, stayed late when needed, and clocked in and out accordingly. But then came the first meeting with the new boss. The new boss told us that there would be no unarranged overtime being paid. He insisted that everyone must clock in and out at the exact scheduled time. That was all he had to say. 15 minutes of production downtime just to tell us that. No explanation of how we were supposed to get the machines ready or cleaned up within our scheduled hours. No plan for handling jobs that might run a few minutes past quitting time. So we adapted. Every morning we'd all arrive at our usual times but then stand around waiting for exactly 8 a.m. Then we'd all line up to punch in through the single time clock. With over 30 workers, this took nearly 5 minutes just to get everyone clocked in. If a job wouldn't finish before lunch, we wouldn't start it. Around 11:45, machines would start shutting down. By 11:55, the production floor was nearly silent as everyone lined up to clock out precisely at noon. Same thing at 12:55 for the 1 p.m. clock in, and again at 4:45 for the 5 p.m. clock out. Production slowed dramatically, but we were following their rules to the letter. A week later, another meeting. The new boss complained that some people were not putting in their full hours. He warned us that clocking in a few minutes late or clocking out a few minutes early was not acceptable. He also demanded that we make sure our time cards were printing in the correct position to make it easier for payroll. One of my co-workers whispered to me that maybe they should fix the machine instead of blaming us. I whispered back that fixing it would cost money, which they obviously didn't want to spend. After the meeting, we became even more meticulous. If you were at the end of the line and clocked in at 8:03, you made sure to clock out at 12:03, not a minute earlier or later. Same for the afternoon shift. The time clock line became a social event where we'd all stand around waiting for our exact minute to punch in or out. The supervisor told us that we needed to get to our machines faster after clocking in. I explained to him that I needed to clock in at exactly 8 a.m., not 7:59 or 8:01, and that I couldn't clock in until everyone ahead of me in line did. This meant I would get to my machine at about 8:04 every day. The supervisor just sighed and told me to try to be quicker about it. 3 months into this new system, production had fallen so far behind that they started asking for weekend work. Time and a half for the first 4 hours, then time and 3/4 after that. Those who could work weekends were making good money, but it wasn't enough to catch up on all the delayed orders. One morning, the new boss called another meeting. The new boss announced that due to financial constraints, they needed to make cutbacks. He said there would be no more overtime, and they would be reducing the workforce. What followed was a round of layoffs, including me, but they still expected the remaining workers to maintain the same output. How? By operating more machines per person. My friend who survived the cuts called me about 6 months later. My friend told me that pretty much everyone had left. He explained that they had been forced to run 3 or 4 machines each with no extra pay. Nobody could keep up, quality went down, and customers started canceling orders. The whole place had shut down the previous week. I asked about the original owner and whether he at least got to sell his remaining half. My friend said no, the company was worthless by the end, and the original owner had lost everything. I wish I could say I felt bad, but I didn't. The new management had been so obsessed with controlling every minute of our time that they destroyed a perfectly functional business. They squeezed so hard that everything slipped through their fingers. I found a new job a month later at another printing company. Funnily enough, they don't have a time clock at all. The owner just trusts us to do our jobs, and somehow everything gets done on time. Imagine that.